what were the first signs that something was wrong?
Well, the first signs, obviously, we were all out of the house. So was my mom and dad, and they'd be driving somewhere, and my dad would take the wrong exit or forget to exit where they were supposed to, to get home. Just being forgetful, basically. Would get down, then he started getting, or he'd get downtown for work, get off the train, not realize why he was down there, and get back on the train and go back home again. Just some kind of confusing things like that. Yeah, so we were trying to get diagnosis from a bunch of different doctors. Went to see a bunch of different people. They did, all kinds of different testing to see, if it was an Alzheimer's type thing. But he started getting paranoid. I think that was one of the bigger symptoms that came out pretty quick. Worrying that people, were going to do things to him or take things from him, or people he knew and loved for years and years were going to do bad things to him and things like that. And then we kind of knew, it was something pretty serious.
So, how long after the first signs did he get the diagnosis, and how long after the diagnosis until he passed away?
So I want to say September is when we first started seeing signs, and we didn't get a diagnosis until the first few days of January at the Mayo Clinic. They diagnosed it pretty quickly once we got there. And he was still pretty much all there. I want to say we took him on vacation in March, took him to spring training, and that's when, by then, his legs weren't working as well. He's having a hard time walking. He was having a lot more difficulty with speech. He was still talking. He could, it would come and go. He had times where everything seemed okay, and then times where, he could just tell something was really wrong, and he was kind of getting lost inside of himself. Now, I want to say earlier than that, by May, we had to have a full-time nurse. And by mid-June, that's when we kind of went into hospice. That went pretty quickly. And, I think at the last stage of this disease, it's when, you're at the end, they can't swallow. So obviously eating and drinking are a problem. Couldn't take, get pills down, things like that. So we tried a few experimental things, and I think they helped and really prolonged it, I think, in a good way for him.
What were the experimental things that you tried?
So the NAD, which now I think more people have been using for a long time, it's a nicotinamide. I can't think of the exact name of it. But a doctor in Florida who deals with this disease told us, that helps clear plaques and things in the brain, she said. So we were giving him a pretty heavy dose of that. And then there was a certain antibiotic, I can't think of the name right now, but you could only get in Mexico at the time. It wasn't cleared for these types of things in the United States, but luckily my brother-in-law is from Mexico, and his family would send it to us. And so we used both of those things, and they seem to help.
How old was he when he died?
He was 69 when he died. So more typical with the, was not the familial version of the disease, which comes on earlier. This was kind of like the random.
The random is about 85% of the cases.
Right. Yeah. So they don't know really where it comes from. The doctors tell us they think there's a trigger for a lot of these people. Something will happen. This stays dormant for a long time, and there'll be a trigger event that'll happen. And we think that was the year prior to his symptoms. His best friend, my Uncle Phil, who I think you remember, he passed away suddenly, and really, was hard on my dad. And they think that could have been his trigger. So
about 10% of the cases have some type of genetic element to it. Have
Right.
you been tested genetically, just as a double check?
We had the testing done. Shortly after his diagnosis. So we were, doctor told us we have nothing to worry about as far as the familiar version. So I think we have just as much chance as anyone else of getting the sporadic version. So
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's currently about one in a million, 1.15,
that's what they
1.5.
say. But through just people we know and people we meet, I think there's a lot more cases out there, probably misdiagnosed. I think the disease progresses so quickly in most people. It's either not diagnosed or, Alzheimer's or things like that. They don't get to the point where they're making that diagnosis. As I was telling you earlier, a friend of ours, her father just passed fall, and it happened within weeks of noticing symptoms. And now they look back and say, well, we always thought he's been forgetful for the past however many years. Well, who knows how long he could have been having some sort of symptoms. But yeah, I think it might be a lot more common than we think. Hopefully not, but.
That this is going to be shown to future healthcare providers. Is there any advice that you can offer them?
The good thing is once we got to the Mayo Clinic, so before Mayo Clinic, I don't think a lot of doctors had the experience, didn't really know. Even when we kind of were looking things online, this is one of the things we came across, and even some of the doctors, once we said, hey, could it be this? It could be. It's so rare, though, they just kind of dismissed it right away. And I don't think they knew much about it. But once we got to Mayo Clinic, which I think they see a lot of the cases, I think they're one of the few labs that does the processing on the spinal fluid test.
The 14 to,
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Right. So I think they see a good number of cases compared to anywhere else. And they were pretty straightforward, which for me, I like that. Some people think it comes off as harsh, but they told us right away, this is what it is. This is what's going to happen. But, I don't think some people want to know how fast it could go. Ultimately, that this is fatal. There's no cure for this. They told my dad, they said 6 to 9 months. And, he said, so I'm not going to be here in a year. And they said, unfortunately, no, not likely. And I think it was actually good for us because we got to, spend the time we wanted to spend with him. We got to, some people, I think, if you don't tell them bluntly what's going to happen, you may waste a bunch of time that you have and not do the things you want to do.